They told me it was junk. $2,900 for a useless patch of dirt nobody wanted. And honestly, the way they said it, it almost sounded like they were doing me a favor. What they didn't realize was that one cheap deal was about to put an entire neighborhood in my hands. And by the time they figured it out, it was already too late. My name's Ethan Cole. I'm an electrician out in a small town just outside Cedar Ridge. The kind of place where your truck is older than your phone and nobody locks their front door unless they're heading out of state. I've been working with wires since I was 19, learned the trade from my uncle, and these days I mostly do residential calls, panel upgrades, EV chargers, nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills and keeps my hands busy. I'm not the kind of guy who goes looking for trouble. I fix what's broken, I go home, I drink my coffee on the porch and listen to the cicadas. That's it. So when I got a call from Daniel Hargrove, I almost didn't pick up. Now Daniel, he was one of those guys. Former corporate attorney, always dressed like he had somewhere more important to be, even when he didn't. Smooth voice, measured words. The kind of man who could smile at you while quietly calculating your net worth. He was on the board of the Silver Creek Estates HOA, about 15 minutes east of me. Silver Creek. That place was a different world. Gated entrance, identical townhomes lined up like they came off a printer, stone facades, manicured lawns, Teslas charging in driveways like it was a requirement. People there didn't call electricians, they contracted services. So yeah, when Daniel Hargrove calls you personally, you notice. Ethan, he said, real calm, like we were already friends. I've got a small opportunity one think might interest you. I remember leaning against my truck, wiping my hands on a rag, already half expecting a lowball job offer. What kind of opportunity? It's a parcel of land, he said, 20 by 30 feet, tucked behind the tennis courts in Silver Creek. Technically part of the original development, but it's useless. No one's been able to do anything with it. We're clearing out minor assets, streamlining the HOA's holdings. Streamlining. That was his word. I let out a little laugh. You're selling land for under $3,000 in that neighborhood and calling it useless? He chuckled too, but it didn't reach his eyes. I could hear that even over the phone. Sometimes things look better on paper than they are in reality. You of all people understand infrastructure limitations. That line stuck with me. Infrastructure limitations. We set up a time that afternoon. When I drove into Silver Creek, it felt like stepping into a brochure. Everything too clean, too perfect. Even the air felt quieter. Daniel was waiting for me near the tennis courts, standing next to a small stretch of dry, cracked ground that looked like it had been forgotten on purpose. And there it was, a beige concrete box, about waist-high, sitting dead center on the lot. No markings, no signage, just humming. You work around electricity long enough, you start to notice that kind of thing. That low vibration in the air, like something's alive under the surface. Daniel walked over with a folder in hand, smiling like this was all routine. That's it, he said, gesturing casually. Utility relic. Leftover from early construction phases. It's inactive now, just hasn't been removed yet. Inactive. I crouched down next to the box, placed my hand on the concrete, and yeah, it was warm. Not hot, but definitely not dead. What's inside? I asked. Old transformer housing, he said quickly. Disconnected years ago. We just never got around to demolishing it. Too quick. I stood up, brushed the dust off my jeans. Mind if I take a look? He hesitated. Just for a second, but I caught it. It's sealed, he said, tone tightening slightly. And technically still under HOA management until the transfer is complete. Then he handed me the papers. Already signed. Laminated. Tabs sticking out like everything had been prepared ahead of time. Most people don't bother reading through all this, he added, almost joking, tapping the signature line. It's standard easement language. That was the moment something shifted. Because I've dealt with enough contractors, inspectors, and city paperwork to know, when someone tells you not to read something, that's exactly when you slow down. I flipped through the pages. Legal jargon, property lines, transfer clauses, and buried in there, just subtle enough to miss if you weren't looking for it, references to existing utility structures, with no clear ownership designation. No ownership. I looked back at the box. Then at Daniel. You said this thing's inactive, I said. It is. You sure about that? He smiled again, but this time it felt thinner. Ethan, if it weren't, do you really think we'd be selling the land for this price? That was a good answer. Too good. And that's what bothered me. Because people like Daniel, they don't make mistakes with money. Not small ones, not big ones, not ever. So I handed the papers back. I'm not signing this today, I said. For the first time, his expression actually cracked. Just a flicker, but it was there. There's really no need to delay, he replied, a little sharper now. It's a simple transaction. Maybe, I said, shrugging. But I don't do simple when it comes to land. I'll think about it. I started walking back to my truck. Ethan, he called after me. I turned. If you walk away from this, he said, voice lower now, less polished, it won't be available again. I just nodded. Then I guess I'll miss out. But the truth was, I wasn't walking away. Not yet. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about that box. The hum, the heat, the way he dodged every direct question. It didn't add up. So I did what most people don't bother doing. I started digging. County records, zoning maps, development permits from when Silver Creek was first built nearly 2 decades ago. And the more I looked, the stranger it got. The parcel existed, sure. But there was no clear documentation tying that utility structure to the HOA. No easement filings, no transfer of infrastructure ownership, nothing. It was like that box had just slipped through the cracks, or been left there on purpose. By the next morning, I went back. Cash in hand. No negotiation. No questions. Daniel met me again, but this time, he wasn't smiling as much. You've made a decision, he said. Yeah, I replied, holding out the envelope. I'll take it. He studied me for a second, like he was trying to figure out what I knew, or what I thought I knew. Then he took the money. And just like that useless piece of land was mine. I didn't celebrate. Didn't tell anyone. I just drove home, parked my truck, and sat there for a minute with the receipt in my hand, feeling that quiet kind of tension you get right before something changes. Because deep down, I had a feeling I hadn't just bought land. I had bought a question. And the next day, I was going to open that box. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was excited, but because something about the whole thing felt off in a way I couldn't shake. You ever get that feeling where your brain keeps replaying a moment, like it's trying to show you something you missed? That was me, staring at the ceiling, hearing that low electrical hum in my head like it followed me home. By sunrise, I was already in my truck. No coffee, no radio, just this quiet focus sitting in my chest. I pulled into Silver Creek just as the sprinklers were kicking on, mist hanging in the air, everything looking peaceful, normal, like nothing weird had ever happened there. But I knew better. The lot looked the same as yesterday. Dry dirt, cracked edges, that same beige concrete box sitting in the middle like it didn't belong and somehow owned the place at the same time. This time, though, it was mine. That changes how you see things. I walked up to it slowly, set my tools down, and just stood there for a second. Listening. That hum. Yeah, it was still there. Steady. Consistent. Not the kind of sound something inactive makes. All right. I muttered to myself, crouching down. Let's see what you really are. The lid wasn't locked. That alone told me a lot. If it was truly abandoned, it would have been sealed or removed. If it was important, it would have been secured. This was somewhere in between, hidden in plain sight. I pried it open, and the second that lid shifted, the hum got louder. Inside wasn't just a transformer. It was everything. A full distribution setup, clean, organized, labeled. Not old, not rusted, not forgotten. Maintained. Actively used. I leaned in closer, my eyes moving across the panels. Breakers labeled clubhouse. Pool system. Street lighting east. Street lighting west. Rows of connections feeding out in different directions. Then I saw it. Main line regulators. Water control valves. Pressure gauges. I actually sat back on the dirt for a second. No way. Because this wasn't just electrical. This was the hub. Power. Water. Core utilities. For the entire neighborhood. I remember laughing, not because it was funny, but because it was so insane it didn't feel real. Like I had just opened a box and found the heartbeat of a place that had no idea where its heart actually was. I pulled out my phone, started taking pictures, documenting everything. Years of working in the field teaches you one thing real fast. If something doesn't make sense, you record it before someone tries to change the story. Then I closed the lid, gently this time, and just stood there, looking out at the row of homes beyond the tennis courts. Clean, expensive, secure, all of it running through that one box. On my land. That's when it hit me. Not all at once, but in pieces, like gears locking into place. 18 years. That's how long Silver Creek had been there. 18 years of families living, kids growing up, people charging cars, filling pools, turning on lights without thinking twice about where any of it came from. And for 18 years, nobody had properly tied that system to the land it sat on. Which meant they didn't own it. I did. I drove straight to the county records office after that. Didn't even bother going home. I needed confirmation, something official to back up what I was starting to understand. The clerk there, older lady named Sharon, she knew me from a few permit jobs I'd filed before. She looked up when I walked in, gave me that half smile. "Morning, Ethan. You look like you've got a question." "Yeah," I said, setting the parcel number on the counter. "I need everything you've got on this property. Original development plans, utility filings, anything tied to infrastructure." She raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions, just disappeared into the back for a bit. When she came back, she had a folder. Not thick. That was the first red flag. We went through it together. Initial land division, zoning approval, construction permits for the homes. All clean, all accounted for. But when it came to utilities, nothing. No recorded easement. No transfer of infrastructure ownership. No agreement tying that box to the HOA or the city. It was just there. Sharon tapped the page, frowning. "That's odd," she said. "For a development this size, there should be a dedicated utility parcel or at least a recorded easement, especially for shared systems." "Yeah," I replied quietly. "You'd think." She looked at me, then at the paperwork again. "Technically, if what you're saying is right, whoever owns that parcel controls whatever's on it." I nodded slowly. That's what I was afraid of. But the truth was, I wasn't afraid. I was starting to understand exactly what I had just stepped into. On the drive home, my phone rang. Daniel. Of course it was. I let it ring for a few seconds before answering. "Yeah." His voice wasn't as smooth this time. Still controlled, but tighter. "Ethan, I wanted to follow up. Make sure everything went through properly." "It did," I said. "Deed's clean. Money's gone. We're all set." A pause. Then, "Good. That's good. And you've had a chance to look at the property?" There it was. I leaned back in my seat, one hand on the wheel, watching the road stretch out ahead of me. "Yeah," I said. I opened the box. Silence. Not long, but long enough. When he spoke again, his tone had changed. No more friendly edge. "You weren't authorized to tamper with HOA infrastructure." I almost smiled. "That's funny," I said. "Because according to the county, it's not HOA infrastructure." Another pause. He was recalculating now. I could hear it. "Ethan," he said slowly, "there may have been administrative oversights in early filings. These things happen. It doesn't change the intent of the property's use. Intent doesn't show up in legal records," I replied. "Ownership does." His voice dropped. "What exactly are you suggesting?" I pulled into my driveway, turned off the engine, just sat there for a second before answering. "I'm not suggesting anything," I said. "I'm just trying to understand why you sold me something your entire neighborhood depends on." That hit. I could feel it through the phone. "You're making assumptions," he snapped. "No," I said, calm now. "I'm making observations." Then I hung up. That conversation told me everything I needed to know. They knew. Maybe not everyone in that neighborhood, but Daniel did. And if he knew, chances are a few others on that board knew too. They had been sitting on that mistake for years, hoping nobody would ever look too closely. And when the chance came, they tried to quietly pass the problem off to someone they thought wouldn't notice. Someone like me. That part. Yeah, that stuck with me. Not because it surprised me, but because of how casually they did it. Like I was just another name, another signature, another guy who wouldn't read the fine print. I've spent my whole life being underestimated. Blue-collar job, dirt on my boots, hands that don't look like they belong in a courtroom. People see that, and they make assumptions. Daniel made the same mistake. And now, he couldn't undo it. That afternoon, I made 2 calls. First one, a licensed surveyor. I wanted official confirmation that the structure sat fully within my parcel boundaries. No gray area, no overlap, nothing they could argue later. Second call, an attorney. Not the flashy kind, just a local property lawyer named Greg Sullivan. Straightforward guy, didn't talk much, but when he did, it mattered. I laid everything out for him. The purchase, the box, the records, the phone call. He listened without interrupting, then leaned back in his chair, laced his fingers together, and said, "Well, Ethan, you didn't just buy land." I let out a slow breath. "Yeah, I'm starting to get that. He nodded. You bought leverage. That word hung in the air for a second. Leverage. Not control, not yet. But the kind of position that forces people to deal with you whether they want to or not. So what do I do with it? I asked. Greg gave a small shrug. That depends on what kind of man you want to be. I didn't answer right away. Because that was the real question, wasn't it? Not what I could do, but what I should. And I had a feeling, no matter what I chose next, things were about to get a whole lot less quiet around here. I wish I could tell you I made the decision quick, that I woke up the next morning with some clear sense of right and wrong, like in the movies where the guy just knows what to do. But that's not how it felt. It felt heavy, like whatever move I made next was going to stick to me for a long time. Because here's the thing, I could have shut it all down. One lock, one call, maybe a couple of hours, and that entire neighborhood would have gone dark. No lights, no water pressure, no pool, no nothing. Just silence and panic. And yeah, legally, I might have been within my rights. But that didn't sit right with me. Not because of Daniel, but because of everyone else. Families, kids, people who had no idea any of this was even happening. Still, doing nothing wasn't an option either. So I went with the one thing that made sense to me. I made it official. Greg drafted the letter. Clean, direct, no threats, just facts. It went out certified to the HOA board, every member listed. 30 days to resolve unauthorized infrastructure placement on privately owned land, or we move forward with enforcement and compensation. We didn't ask. We informed. 7 days later, I went back to the lot. Not angry, not dramatic, just focused. I had a contractor buddy help me set up an 8-foot steel fence around the entire parcel. Clean lines, solid posts. Nothing fancy but impossible to ignore. Then I installed a heavy-duty padlock on the gate. And right in the center, I hung a sign. Private property. Utility access by lease only. That was it. No insults, no threats. Just the truth. By the time I got home, my phone was already blowing up. Unknown numbers, missed calls, voicemails stacking up. I let most of them sit. If people wanted to talk, they could do it the right way. Daniel didn't wait long. He showed up in person that afternoon. And the first thing I noticed, he wasn't driving that polished black Tesla anymore. This time it was a beat-up gray sedan, something practical, forgettable. His tie was loose, shirt wrinkled, like he'd been pulling at it all day. He didn't even try to smile. "What are you doing?" he demanded the second I stepped out onto my porch. I leaned against the railing, took a sip of my coffee, let the silence sit for a second. "Securing my property." "You're interfering with essential services," he snapped. "This is illegal." I shook my head slowly. "No. What's illegal is running infrastructure on land you don't own for almost 2 decades. His jaw tightened. "We can correct the paperwork. This doesn't need to escalate." "It already has," I said. "The moment you tried to sell it off like it was nothing." That hit him. You could see it in his eyes. Not anger. Not yet. Something closer to fear. "You don't understand the implications here," he said, lowering his voice. "This affects hundreds of people." "I understand exactly what it affects," I replied. "That's why I didn't shut it off." He took a step closer. "Then be reasonable." I let out a small breath, set my coffee down. "I am being reasonable. Your board has a problem. I'm offering a solution." He stared at me for a long second, then finally asked, "What do you want?" That was the first honest question he'd asked since this started. So I gave him an honest answer. "Talk to your board," I said. "Set up a meeting. Everyone involved. Not just you." He hesitated, then nodded once. "Fine." 2 days later, I walked into a conference room inside the Silver Creek clubhouse. And yeah, you could feel it the second you stepped in. That smell of coffee that's been sitting too long, mixed with tension thick enough to taste. About 60 homeowners packed into that room, some standing along the walls. All eyes on me like I was either the problem or the solution. Maybe both. Greg stood beside me, calm as ever, folder in hand. Daniel sat at the front table with the rest of the board, but he looked different now. Smaller, somehow. One of the homeowners spoke up before I even sat down. "Is it true?" she asked. "You can shut everything off?" I didn't rush my answer. "Technically, yes." Murmurs spread across the room. Another voice, sharper this time. "That sounds like extortion." Greg stepped forward slightly, voice even. "No, it's property law." That quieted things down real fast. I took a seat, rested my hands on the table, looked around the room. Regular people. Not villains. Just caught in something they didn't create. So I spoke plainly. For 18 years, this community has been operating on infrastructure that was never legally secured. That's not on you. That's on the people who built this place and the ones who managed it after. But the reality is that system sits on land I now own. I paused. Let that settle. I'm not here to punish anyone. I'm here to fix the problem. Daniel shifted in his seat, but didn't interrupt. So here are the terms. I continued. You purchased the parcel from me at fair market value, adjusted for what it actually is. Greg slid the folder forward. Numbers printed clean and clear. $150,000 for the land. $18,000 in back compensation for usage. Total, $168,000. A wave of whispers rolled through the room. That's insane, someone muttered. I nodded slightly. What's insane is that this wasn't handled years ago. I leaned back just a bit, kept my tone steady. Break it down across the community. It's about what? $2,000 per household? For permanent control of your utilities. Silence again, but different this time. People were doing the math. Then I added the part Daniel wasn't expecting. And one more thing. All eyes back on me. I want a seat on the HOA board. 5 years. Oversight on infrastructure decisions. That one hit harder than the money. Daniel finally spoke, voice tight. You're inserting yourself into governance now. I met his eyes. I'm making sure this doesn't happen again. A man near the back stood up. Why should we trust you? I didn't hesitate. You shouldn't. Not blindly. But you also shouldn't trust the system that put you in this position. That landed. You could feel the shift. Not everyone agreed with me. But they weren't defending him anymore either. The discussion went on for a while after that. Voices raised, tempers flaring, people going back and forth between anger and practicality. At one point, someone actually laughed and said, "We're arguing over $2,000 while sitting on $800,000 homes." That kind of broke the tension a little. Eventually, it came down to a vote. One by one, hands went up. Not all at once. Not eagerly. But steadily. Because at the end of the day, they didn't really have another option. 30 days after I bought that useless piece of land, the check cleared. The deed transferred. The infrastructure was legally theirs. And just like that, the crisis was over. Daniel resigned that same morning. No speech, no explanation. Just gone. I didn't celebrate. Didn't throw a party. Didn't buy anything new. I just went home, walked into my living room, and set two things side by side on the shelf. The original deed and the official agreement. Sat there for a while, just looking at them. Because yeah, I made money. More than I expected. But that wasn't really the part that stuck with me. It was how close it all came to going another way. How easy it would have been for someone else to sign those papers without reading, to never open that box, to let that mistake sit there for another 18 years. Or worse, to use it differently than I did. I still drive past Silver Creek sometimes. Everything looks the same as it always did. Clean streets, quiet houses, lights on at night like nothing ever happened. Most people there probably don't think about me anymore. Maybe a few do. Maybe a few don't like me. And honestly, I get it. Because depending on how you look at it, I either fixed a problem nobody else could, or I leveraged a mistake for my own gain. Maybe both. So here's the question. If you were in my position, what would you have done? Would you have walked away, shut it all down, or done exactly what I did? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I can tell you right now, not everyone agrees on the answer.